Searches by more than 24 countries have turned up nothing but frustration and new theories about Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fresh Outlook. I'm Mia Toschi. It has now been 2 weeks since Flight 370 vanished with 239 souls aboard. Devastated family members are still waiting in agony. If there is anything positive, it is that the world has come together with dozens of countries helping in the search, which is now centered off of Perth, Australia.
Australian search planes return empty-handed. Crew have failed to locate any wreckage of flight MH370 in the southern Indian Ocean.
We just landed from an 11-hour mission out to the search area. It's unfortunate to say that we haven't found anything out there.
A senior intelligence expert in Australia is not convinced the debris found in the water is from the jet.
It's probably an ISO container. It was partially submerged on the 16th of March. It's probably even more submerged now.
Meanwhile, a Chinese vessel has joined the search as Chinese parents and children hang on to hope. Out of 239 people on board the missing plane, 153 were Chinese.
They are beginning to accept that maybe their loved ones are not coming back.
In Malaysia, the administration is upbeat about finding the plane after almost 2 weeks.
And to talk more about the global mystery and a possible sighting from a Chinese satellite, we are joined by former White House aide Dee Dee Benkie, journalist Mustafa Tabanli, Captain Tom Bunn, and from our D.C. studios is Allan Topol, author of The Russian Endgame. We welcome all of you and thank you for being with us today. Okay, so we have 11 countries that are now joining in this search. We talked about that Chinese satellite, and Captain, we're going to start things off with you. You were telling me just a few moments ago that you don't think that this...
No, I don't think so. This piece is too wide. It's quite long, but it's also too wide to be any piece of the plane that would come off. I think that in this case they're just looking for anything to make some news because there's nothing on the story.
And we certainly have a lot of theories out there, and certainly when there are no answers, people's imaginations start to go. I want to just find out what everybody is thinking. Obviously, the first question is, do you think that this could be a terror attack? Is any kind of hijacking? Dee Dee, we'll start that one.
Yeah, you know, I'm going to stick with what I said last week. I really think this is one of the pilots. Maybe one, and he kicked the other pilot out and he took over me because we still do not know where this plane is. So you know it had to be people who knew exactly what they were doing. I mean, it is just mesmerizing that we do not know where this huge plane is, the 777. So how could it be some hijacker or some random person, trying to make it work? I mean, it just seems like to me it has to be an expert.
And Mustafa?
And also, in terms of security issues, I would think that airports should have been more connected. Like, if an airplane goes off the radar, you should tell other people about it. You should say, well, we lost a plane, China, Indonesia. Why don't you check out? Because, I mean, it's very concerning.
Well, isn't that the concern? Because Malaysia, they really didn't want to cooperate to begin with, and he let a lot of time go by. Isn't that one of the concerns?
Well, that is one of the concerns from the Chinese government. But I think one of the other concerns, again, Captain, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of folks now are afraid to fly. This is really... struck terror, even though this is many, many, many miles away.
Any place. I get emails and calls every day saying, I don't think I'm ever going to fly again. I say, wait a minute. The 777's been flying for over 15 years, and we've never had an accident that had anything to do with the plane. And this is on the other side of the planet, so why don't you want to fly from New York to Boston? It's just the unknown drives people crazy.
No, and it certainly is probably the strangest unknowns that we've ever probably seen. We want to just check in with you again also about that flight simulator, but first we want to go to D.C. and check in with Allan Topol, who's down there. Thanks for joining us, Allan. And a lot of the theories are being bounced around why this pilot had a flight simulator to why these two gentlemen had fake passports. What are your thoughts?
Well, thanks a lot. First of all, it's a pleasure to be back with you again. Mia, my thought is I went searching for some expert help on this, and I spoke to a pilot who's a longtime pilot with American Airlines and was a Navy pilot before because I was searching for some expertise. This was 3 days ago, and I wanted to get what his take on it rather than my speculation. What he said, he was very, very clear that this plane had been hijacked because he said that the time at which the two transponders were hooked off, the the difference in the time one was hooked off than the other was hooked off, he said is consistent only with the idea that the plane was hijacked. So then I asked him, what does he think happened to it after that? He said that he didn't know. He said, but one possibility is it landed somewhere at a landing strip, and that meant it had the military of some country giving it support so they could bring it in under radar on a long enough landing strip. The other possibility was they lost control of it and it crashed. But since there's no debris, he came back to his first theory, it's been landed somewhere. And that was his expert opinion, and that's the closest I heard to any expert talking, Mia.
Well, Allan, it's interesting because I've obviously been interviewing quite a few people too, and we have our wonderful captain here in the studio. One of the theories that is starting to emerge is that 370 switched off its radar, then shadowed another plane, and possibly landed north of India or in Afghanistan. Captain, is that possible?
Well, it is possible to shadow another airplane, but you wouldn't necessarily need to, because once you've gotten out of radar contact, once you're a couple of hundred miles offshore, you're not being seen on radar. And it would be pretty easy to go out in the ocean and go pretty much where you want to go at an altitude that the plane is not going to use extra fuel. And then before you reach the radar, go down low, maybe 50, 100 feet off the ground, below where the radar can see you, and then go into an airport that has been planned for receiving the plane.
And I have two specific questions for you. Last week we also talked about how the plane went up 45,000 feet.
Yes, yes.
If that happened, what happened to the passengers?
Well, the reason, first of all, we don't know if that information is correct, but the only reason I can see why a pilot would take the plane up to that altitude is this. At that altitude, if you depressurize the airplane, it takes only 9 to 15 seconds to knock out everyone who's not on pressurized oxygen, not just oxygen coming from the masks that hang down the cabin, not from even masks that in the cockpit that were just in the normal position, but they'd have to be under pressure oxygen to put that oxygen into the body. So if a hijacker wanted to have all the passengers pass out, the hijacker could take the plane up. But my speculation when I was flying actively is if I got hijacked, I would take the plane up there and then depressurize the plane so the hijacker would be immobilized.
Okay, that's certainly, and you know, we also were talking about the flight simulator that the senior captain had. In your estimation, does any pilot need a flight simulator?
No.
I mean, I know they're relatively easy to get.
Yeah, this is pretty fishy, doesn't it? I just think that's the guy. I mean, you know, you don't know because none of us do, but he was at one control. He's the senior pilot. You know, who is expert enough, has expertise to pull this off? So it has to be somebody who's there, someone who's settled in. I mean, and then you know, if you're going to try to hijack a plane, you don't want any interference with the people in the back of the plane, so that's what you would do.
And you're nodding your head, yes, Mustafa.
And why would they? I mean, like, they have lithium batteries, and what is so critical there to be hijacked? And there is no political motivation because that would have come up. So is there something valuable in the plane that we don't know?
And it's interesting that you bring up the lithium batteries, because that was another theory, that maybe something happened with the lithium batteries and the pilots, you know, tried to get some sort of a fire out.
Yeah, that's another possibility. And theoretically, they could go to 45,000 feet to try to get the fire out. So that's another
Boy, this
reason.
is awfully far-fetched. I mean, it's just so crazy that all these theories are out there and we still don't know.
Well, and it's not just a whodunit, but it's certainly, Allan in D.C., it's also a why. I mean, I think that's the biggest question, why?
Exactly. I think that's you're right. That's a why is a good question. But there has been in Malaysia, there is a bitter political opposition. They've come through a very tight political election. There is a lot of dissent. There are terrorist movements. There are religious movements. There's been very little focus on the internal situation in Malaysia. And I think maybe we should start to focus on that situation because it might be an internal thing as far as who did it and motives. We're reaching out for Al-Qaeda and international groups. Why not focus on Malaysian opposition groups?
I think
that could be fertile.
I think the Chinese government is certainly in agreement with you there, Allan. But it is certainly a why question. But usually if you do have a terrorist organization, by now, 2 weeks later, you would have somebody claim responsibility.
Well, unless they actually wanted to use the plane as a weapon, and if you would just let the world believe the plane has
That's true. That's the first step, and that's another theory, which kind of makes sense. you know, they want to take that and that's part of a bigger plan. And one of the pilots, he was politically involved. I mean, he was wearing T-shirts about the opposition, so it could very well be the case.
And I want to get back to that flight simulator because we never did finish that question to you, Captain. Why would a captain have a flight simulator, and for what reason?
I don't really know any pilots who had flight simulators and play with them, but the other thing to keep in mind is if you were a pilot and you wanted to plan this, you would not need a flight simulator. You would not need that at all to do that.
Unless you wanted to go through something different, that you didn't want it to be on other people's radars, because if you're going to go through a regular flight simulator, they're going to monitor what they do. So it sort of makes sense. If they want to have something, they want to go sneaky with it, something different, whatever that would be.
Well, it doesn't make sense to me, because you would have to first plan it in your head.
But then they wanted to play on it in the simulator at home if they're going to do it.
But there's no point in putting it on a simulator, because you can do it completely in your head.
But they did say, wasn't there was another theory that the computer was pre-programmed?
That's a computer that's used for navigation. And all you need to do to program the computer is put in what they call the scratch pad, 4 letters. For example, if you wanted to go to New York, you'd put in K for US, JFK, and then hit return. The plane's going to go there. It takes that long to do it. So pre-programmed, programmed later, it doesn't really matter.
As a pilot, and I'll say this to the entire panel, does it worry that security was this lax? Does it worry you? I mean, obviously the U.S.
Traveling to Malaysia and some of these countries where it is lax, I don't worry about too much in our country. I think we do a good job. But in these other countries, it is more lax, unfortunately. And whenever you're going to travel across the ocean, it's a little scarier now. I don't mind going from Boston to D.C., but to go across to Australia, I don't know, I'll be thinking second thoughts about that. Might want to take a boat.
As a journalist, I went all over the world. I've been to India, I've been to Afghanistan, I've lived in Australia, so I've been all over. And now all of a sudden I'm going, well, geez, that seemed a little too easy. And any thoughts on that, Mustafa?
Well, I think the location is a little tricky. If someone's flying from London to JFK and crash somewhere, I mean, that's pretty much under the radar. And then in the middle of the ocean, that's make it very hard to find, and that brings out all the speculation, because there is not much air traffic there. In Europe,
exactly.
In North America, there's a lot of air traffic. So if something happens, you find it pretty much very quickly, and over there it's harder. They say it's a big plane.
Well, it's a big ocean.
Yeah, we're flying down in Florida. They're going to see the plane. You know, but over the ocean, there was so much space. It's scary.
I do want to talk about theories that we can get rid of. There's one being tossed around that it was a meteor. Is that?
I think that's a good one to get rid of.
Well, but there's a lot of different conspiracy theories
that's
now.
True.
So the meteor finally hit it after 8 hours to knock it down.
Okay, well, thank
that's
you.
Pretty far out.
But I think it's good to get rid of some of the Alan?
But Mia, Mia, I mean, one thing we talked about, why would they do it and why hasn't anybody taken credit? But one possibility that struck me, if in fact it's an opposition party to the Malaysian government, they don't have to take credit. They've already horrendous amount of damage to Malaysia. I was considering a trip on a new book I'm working on to go to Malaysia and Singapore.
Are you going now?
I just changed my plans.
Exactly.
No, I'm not going. So, I mean, the damage to Malaysia is huge. They don't have to take credit. They have really given that economy a huge blow in that
And again,
government.
they have a picture of one of the pilots wearing a T-shirt with that, you know, the opposition parties, and then having a flight simulator. I don't know. It just seems very
the
fishy.
passports, all that.
Yeah.
I certainly hope that by next week they may have found the plane, certainly for the families to give them closure. But I have a feeling we are going to be talking about this again next week. We thank our panel very much. Don't go away, everyone. When we come back, we'll take a look at the latest news from Crimea and ask the question, how will Vladimir Putin's actions affect the U.S. markets?